Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you for reading that, Joan. That was lovely. That was lovely. So where do we go? Where do we go with this? I love this passage from Mark particularly, and talking about the seeds that are growing and what's happening with the seeds that are growing in our world. And I love it. And it's interesting because it is very specific. And it's very specific to the three processes that Jesus brings forward in this scripture. Because he talks about how they can fall on the path and be eaten by the birds, or the seeds can fall among the rocky, sort of the less desirable soil and sprout up quickly and then wither away and die. And then those that fall on what Jesus calls fertile soil. And those bring lots of green, which we think of as food and opportunity for eating. But what happens when we respect all three of these avenues of planting seeds? I think that we need to think about that in a way through our Christian faith, because we all are very malleable in a way that as we move into this 21st century, and we're now comfortably into 2024, I don't know whether many of you have started now writing 24. You don't write 2024 anymore. We've kind of fallen back into that pattern that before the turn of the millennia into 2000, everybody wrote 99 or 1934, or what year were you born? 828. What year were you born? 59. You didn't think about saying 1959 until all of a sudden we had this major Y2K crash, that computers were going to be messed up, the world was going to end, God was going to call it a day. All of these things were going to happen because we moved over into the next millennia. Well, we now have 1,000 years or many years to go before we're going to change that number again. So I've got now where I'm writing whatever the date is, 050424. And so these seeds of planting do happen in many, many ways. So as we move into that, though, as John and I were talking about this morning, the future growth of many of our communities depends on the seeds that we're planting today. It depends on what we're doing today. If we want something to change, we need to begin today and plant the seeds and then allow them time to grow. Allow them time to mature. And allow them time to either become fertile, become food for the birds, or maybe be short-lived seeds that don't necessarily last. What about if we look at all three of those avenues as being very good ways to plant seeds? So Jesus is talking about scattering of the seeds. The sower went out and was scattering the seeds. So just this week, and I just told John this story this morning as we were talking, I was at a women's group, and we were out and about in this women's group, and we were all sitting around talking. We had clay on our faces, and we were having a wonderful day, and we had sat in the hot tub together. In the morning, we'd had some yoga together, and then we had a beautiful lunch prepared by our host, and it was all vegan, vegetarian, and it was beautiful food. And then she had some chicken on the side for those who were meat eaters, and then we had this beautiful, rich conversation around the table. And I invited around the table, I said, okay, I want to know, what is your greatest accomplishment? And you can't say my children or my family. And all of them went. And so we spent the next time, we just spent time, I just let it drop then. I didn't pursue it, I just let it drop. So then it was funny because somebody jumped in right away and said, oh, and she had something great to say. And then someone else did. And then from that conversation, we went off on a tangent. But do you know what? Through the rest of the day, all of a sudden somebody'd say, oh, I know, I just thought of my greatest accomplishment. And they would tell us something that had just all of a sudden dawned on them that they could share as their greatest accomplishment. Well, as we were sitting later in the afternoon, we were sitting downstairs and we had these clay faces on and everything. We were talking about just what everybody talks about, which is our world in general, and how we're all fearful. Where's it going? What's going to happen in November? And I'm not saying any names. I'm not saying anything because I don't need to. You know what I'm asking. What's going to happen in November? And where are we going? And the war and all of these things and everything we were talking about around this little group of women was all world related. It was showing us how we are one song. We are now a world universe. We are now a universe, a one song. Because we here in Ravenshoe, or it was in Jackson's Point where I was for this Women's Day, or for me in Beaverton, or for my work in Uxbridge, or for my time with the Spencer House Long-Term Care in Aurelia, these people are all talking about world events, things that are going on in our world. And I said to these women, I said, do you know what? There is ancient text. I didn't say there's in the Bible it says. I said, ancient text tells us in one of the first books that the divine source kind of brought everything together in chaos. And the divine source kind of pulled it all into one and made order. And in that order, created a garden. And in that garden, planted some seeds. And along with the seeds, planted some trees. And in the trees, planted the tree of life. And then this tree of knowledge. Now, in the scripture this morning, it says the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Let's drop the good and evil, because that's the translation. So let's just leave it off for a moment. Let's talk about the tree of life and the tree of knowledge. So God said, you can have fruit off the tree of life. Have all you want. Live your life in this garden that I've built for you. Love your life. Live your life. However, do not eat from the tree of knowledge, because you will die. Interesting. So now in 2024, we're all living this tree of knowledge existence because we know too much. We have too much knowledge about the world events, the wars, the pillages, the fighting, the schools that are in, protesting, police pushing in. We know what's happening in California. We know what's happening in Florida. We know what's happening in the Sudan. We know what's happening, and it's killing us. We have eaten from the tree of knowledge in this modern day existence, which another word for the tree of knowledge is the internet. And we're feeding off of this tree of knowledge that God has said to us, you will die. So how do we plant seeds again and begin a new journey today that will give us opportunity to take back some of our knowledge and get back to the tree of life? That's the big question. We're scattering the seeds, as we've read in Mark, and the sower is throwing them out, and we've now got all of these seeds falling in different places. They're all seeds with potential. They just need to be understood for their purpose. Is their purpose to strictly feed the birds? My friend goes out every morning with sunflower seeds. She has a ribbon bucket out of it. She puts it into a little feeder. Does she expect sunflowers to grow? What's she doing? She's feeding the birds. And then you scatter it around on the ground, like the sower that God talks about, or Jesus talks about, and the squirrels come, and the blue jays come, and the doves peck around. So we're feeding these birds. So those seeds are doing their purpose. They're perfectly fine doing what they're needing to do. And some of them might sprout up there. Some of them might, all of a sudden you might see this little sunflower coming up. But unfortunately, the guy with the big lawnmower is going to take it down, right? So it's done. But then you take those same seeds and you take them out into the back 40 and you scatter them around and they get a chance to fully germinate and fully become what they're supposed to be, which is a sunflower. Then all of a sudden the sunflower is beautiful. So all seeds are valuable. All seeds are needed in our lives. All seeds are needed in our tree of life. It's culling out what is the tree of knowledge. What is it we want to take into our heart that is good and feeds us and is healthy? I just love this scripture for the way it's read, and it was read this morning. I read it from this inclusive Bible, and I just love it. And when you go on from there, it says in this Bible, the translation reads, "Then Yahweh took the earth creature and settled it in the Garden of Eden, so that it might cultivate and care for the land. Yahweh commanded the earth creature, 'You may eat as much as you like from any of the trees of the garden, except the tree of knowledge. You must not eat from that tree, for on the day you eat from that tree, that is the day you will die.'" Yes, die. So we're reminded in Genesis, the very first book of the Hebrew scripture, how we need to be careful how much knowledge we gain. The innocence of children. Often we will say when something happens to a child, or if a parent dies when a person is young, they say, "Oh, their innocence has been taken." We are the innocence of God. We have been created in the image of the divine source, which is that which is the most innocent and pure and whole. We are then here, spiritual beings, in a vessel, living a human experience. And in that human experience, there is a plethora of areas where we can eat from the tree of knowledge. And then we take it inside of ourselves and we're unsure of what to do with it. So I invite you, as you go from this place today, as you move from here today, to pay attention to how much knowledge you are taking in. What are you listening to? What are you watching? What are you smelling? What are you eating? What are you touching? What are you feeling? Are they from the tree of life, or are they from the tree of knowledge? Are they going to create in you an angst? And if they are, then measure them carefully. Measure those seeds carefully. And decide whether you want to replant them somewhere else, or do you want to take them into your heart. We are created in the image of divine. We are created in the image of God. We are a perfect source. And when we live our lives in that remembrance and in that life, the seeds we plant will be helpful and wholesome and loving. And I invite you to do so.